Wesley Harmon always believed he'd built a life of substance. At 42, he'd transformed from a blue-collar kid from Millfield to the owner of Harmon Construction, a regional powerhouse that specialized in luxury home renovations across 3 states. He'd earned his success through calculated risks and an unwavering work ethic, traits his father, a factory worker, had instilled in him through both praise and punishment. His company occupied a converted warehouse downtown, where the exposed brick and steel beams served as testament to his appreciation for honest materials and structural integrity. When clients walked in, they immediately understood this was a man who built things to last. Wesley had met Sybil 15 years ago at a charity auction where she'd been coordinating the event. With her honey blonde hair and quick smile, she'd charmed him immediately. But it was her ambition that sealed his interest. She spoke of building her event planning business with the same passion he felt for his construction empire. Their courtship had been brief but intense, culminating in a wedding that combined his preference for understated elegance with her flair for dramatic flourishes. For a decade, they'd seemed perfect, the power couple of Millfield who hosted summer barbecues in their sprawling backyard and organized the annual Christmas toy drive. The birth of their twins, Phoebe and Philip, now 8, had completed what appeared to be an American dream fulfilled. The Harmon household ran with precision. Wesley managed his growing business, while Sybil balanced her event planning with managing their social calendar. But perfection, Wesley had learned through years of construction, was merely an illusion created by skillful finishing work that concealed structural flaws. The first hairline crack appeared 3 years ago when Sybil's college friend Drake Powell moved back to town. A commercial real estate developer with cosmopolitan tastes and connections in major cities, Drake quickly integrated himself into their social circle. Wesley had initially appreciated Drake's business insights and the potential for collaboration. "Your wife is something special," Drake had told him during a backyard cookout, bourbon in hand. "You're a lucky man." "Don't I know it?" Wesley had replied, missing the lingering gaze Drake cast towards Sybil as she laughed with friends across the patio. Wesley's closest friend, Vince Reeves, had noticed it, though. As they cleaned the grill later that evening, Vince had nodded toward Drake, who was helping Sybil clear glasses from the outdoor tables. "That guy seems to hover around Sybil a lot," Vince observed. "They're old friends," Wesley had said dismissively. "Known each other since college." Vince had pursed his lips, but said nothing more. Looking back, Wesley would recognize this as the moment he should have paid more attention. As Drake became a fixture in their social circle, Wesley's parents, Bernard and Judith Harmon, had taken an immediate liking to the man. Bernard, particularly, seemed impressed by Drake's stories of developing properties in Chicago and Seattle. "Now there's someone who understands vision," Bernard had commented after one dinner party. "Reminds me of yourself, but with a bit more polish." The comment had stung more than Wesley cared to admit. He'd spent his entire life seeking his father's approval. The construction company itself had been built partly to prove himself worthy of Bernard's respect. Wesley's sister, Tara, had been the only family member who seemed unimpressed by Drake's charm. "There's something calculated about him," she told Wesley, "like he's always working an angle." But life had continued its comfortable rhythm, even as Wesley found himself spending more time at work, securing larger projects that required his personal attention. Sybil's event planning business had also flourished, often keeping her out late for client meetings and venue preparations. Their schedules rarely aligned anymore, ships passing in the night, exchanging brief updates on children and commitments before collapsing into exhausted sleep. When they did attend social functions together, they performed the role of the perfect couple, but the genuine connection had begun to fade. Philip and Phoebe served as their strongest bond. Every Sunday, Wesley took them fishing at Lake Callaway, maintaining a tradition his own father had shared with him. Sybil would use those mornings to catch up on work or meet with clients, claiming weekend appointments were unavoidable in the event business. On one such Sunday, Philip had looked up from baiting his hook and asked, "Dad, does Mom like Drake more than you?" Wesley's hands had stilled. "What makes you ask that, buddy?" "She laughs different with him. And he comes over sometimes when you're working late." Wesley had carefully set down his fishing rod. "He comes to our house when I'm not there." Philip had nodded. "Mom says he helps her with business stuff. They talk in her office with the door closed." That night, Wesley had casually mentioned Drake's visits to Sybil. She'd explained them away as consultations on venues for her clients. Drake knew all the commercial properties in the area. After all, the explanation seemed reasonable, and Wesley had let it drop, ignoring the tight feeling in his chest. 3 weeks later, Wesley returned home early from a site visit, hoping to surprise Sybil with lunch. As he pulled into the driveway, he noticed Drake's Range Rover parked across the street. He sat in his truck for a long moment, staring at the vehicle, telling himself there could be an innocent explanation. But another crack had formed in the foundation of his marriage, and deep down, Wesley knew no amount of cosmetic repair would fix what was beginning to break. Chapter 2. Shadows and Whispers. The Range Rover became a specter that haunted Wesley's thoughts. After seeing it parked near his home, he began noticing it everywhere, at the grocery store, outside Sybil's favorite boutique, in the parking lot of the children's school. Each sighting twisted something deeper inside him, but he maintained his composure, waiting and watching. Meanwhile, Sybil's behavior shifted subtly. She changed her perfume, updated her wardrobe, and spent more time at the gym. Her phone became an extension of her hand, and she'd step away to take calls, her voice dropping to a murmur behind closed doors. "Business is really taking off," she explained when Wesley questioned her constantly lit-up screen. "These society weddings require 24/7 attention." One evening, as they prepared for bed, Wesley asked casually, "How's Drake doing? Haven't seen him at the house lately." Sybil's hand paused briefly as she applied night cream. "He's been busy with that new development downtown." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. Dad mentioned he's thinking of investing in it." "Oh." She continued her bedtime ritual, not meeting his eyes in the mirror. "Well, I'm sure Drake would appreciate that. He's always respected your father's business sense." "More than mine, apparently," Wesley said, keeping his tone light despite the bitterness underlying the words. Sybil turned then, her expression softening. "Don't be ridiculous. Your father just enjoys feeling relevant in retirement. You know how he is, always needing to be the patriarch making big decisions." This moment of genuine connection, Sybil accurately reading his lifelong struggle for his father's approval, almost made Wesley dismiss his suspicions. Almost. The following week, Vince invited Wesley to a poker game. As they played, conversation drifted to local gossip. "Heard Drake Powell's looking to purchase that old textile mill," someone mentioned. "Smart move," another player commented. "That area is primed for redevelopment." Vince, shuffling cards, added casually, "He's been spending a lot of time with the Callaway Heights crowd." He glanced at Wesley. "Saw him having drinks with your wife at the Shoreline Grill Wednesday afternoon." The room fell silent. Everyone at the table knew Wesley worked late on Wednesdays, overseeing his crews at a major renovation across town. "Business meeting, probably," Wesley said, arranging his cards with steady hands. "Sybil's planning the hospital fundraiser." After poker, Vince walked Wesley to his truck. "Look, I didn't mean to create tension back there, but as your friend, I thought you should know." "Know what exactly?" Wesley's voice remained controlled. They were in a corner booth, holding hands across the table. Vince leaned against the truck, and it wasn't the first time I've seen them together. Wesley absorbed this information with the same methodical focus he applied to evaluating structural damage in a building. "How long?" "I've noticed them together around town for a few months. Different restaurants, always looking intimate." Vince hesitated. "There's something else. My cousin works at the Grand Hotel. Said they've been checking in there every Tuesday afternoon for at least 6 weeks. The Grand Hotel was 30 miles away in the next county, far enough to avoid local gossip, or so they must have thought. "I appreciate the information," Wesley said, his voice hollow. That night, he lay awake beside Sybil, listening to her measured breathing, wondering how many lies had passed between them. The thought of confronting her immediately crossed his mind, but Wesley had always been strategic. In construction, rushing into repairs without properly assessing damage often led to greater structural failure. The next morning, he called Neil Fisher, a private investigator he'd used previously to vet potential business partners. "I need surveillance," Wesley explained. "Discreet, thorough, and documented." Over the following weeks, Neil provided what Wesley had already suspected: photos of Sybil and Drake entering the Grand Hotel, dining together in secluded restaurants, even sharing a passionate kiss in Drake's car outside her office. The most damning evidence came in the form of text messages Neil had recovered from Sybil's cloud backup. The exchanges between her and Drake were explicit, discussing not only their physical relationship, but also their future plans. "When are you going to leave him?" Drake had written. After his birthday, Sybil had replied. "We'll have the family celebration, then I'll tell him. It'll be easier once everything's out in the open. His parents already prefer me anyway." Drake had texted back. "This transition will be smoother than you think." Each revelation should have cut deeper, but instead, Wesley felt a strange calm settling over him. The uncertainty had been worse than confirmation. Now that he knew, he could plan his response with the same precision he applied to his construction projects. The most unexpected betrayal came when Neil's investigation revealed regular meetings between Drake and Wesley's parents. Through careful tracking, he discovered they'd been having lunch together monthly, without Sybil, without him, and apparently without any intention of mentioning these meetings to Wesley. They appear to be discussing financial matters, Neil reported, showing Wesley photos of his father passing documents to Drake at a local steakhouse. "Based on what I could observe, it looks like investment paperwork." The knowledge that his parents, particularly his father, had formed some kind of independent relationship with Drake felt like a foundation giving way beneath his feet. Not just his marriage, but his entire family structure seemed compromised. Wesley carefully compiled all the evidence, storing the digital files on an encrypted drive and placing hard copies in his office safe. He made no accusations, confronted no one. Instead, he continued his daily routine, building a mental blueprint for what would come next. As his birthday approached, he observed Sybil making minimal preparations, a stark contrast to the elaborate celebration she'd orchestrated for his parents' anniversary the month before, or the extravagant party she'd planned for Drake's birthday in the spring. The final confirmation came 3 days before his birthday, when he overheard Sybil on the phone in her office. "I've already spoken with a lawyer," she was saying quietly. "The house is half mine, plus I'll get support for the kids. Once everything's settled, we can start fresh without sneaking around. Yes, I love you too. Don't worry about Wesley. He's so absorbed in his work, he'll probably be relieved." That night, as Sybil slept beside him, Wesley stared at the ceiling and made his decision. If she wanted to wait until after his birthday to destroy their family, he would allow her that timeline. But the ending would not unfold as she and Drake had planned. Chapter 3: The Cupcake Catalyst. On the morning of Wesley's birthday, he woke to an empty bed. Downstairs, he found a note from Sybil explaining she'd taken the twins to school and would be running errands all day to prepare for tonight. The house felt unusually quiet as he made his own coffee and toast, a small ritual that now seemed symbolic of his future. Throughout the workday, Wesley received the usual birthday messages: clients, employees, business associates offering perfunctory well wishes. His phone remained conspicuously silent from family members. No message from Sybil, no call from his parents, nothing from his sister Tara, who was typically religious about birthday celebrations. As 5 o'clock approached, he closed down his computer and drove home, mentally preparing for whatever minimal celebration awaited, and for what would follow in its wake. The house was quiet when he arrived, but he could hear movement in the kitchen. He found Sybil there, hurriedly arranging a store-bought cupcake on a plate. A card leaned against a salt shaker, his name hastily scrawled across the envelope. "Oh, you're home," she said, her surprise seeming genuine. "I thought you'd be working late like usual." "It's my birthday," Wesley replied simply. "Right, of course." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "The kids are at my mother's for the night, so we can have a quiet evening." Wesley surveyed the kitchen. No gift, no special dinner preparations, just a single cupcake with a candle pressed haphazardly into its center. "Is this it?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral. "Well, it's just another birthday," Sybil said, striking a match to light the candle. "We're not exactly kids anymore, right?" The words echoed those Wesley knew his father would say later. Neil had shown him text exchanges between Sybil and his parents, confirming they'd be stopping by briefly with their own token acknowledgement. As if summoned by his thoughts, the doorbell rang. Sybil brightened immediately. "That must be your parents." Bernard and Judith entered with the practiced ease of frequent visitors. Judith gave Wesley a perfunctory hug while Bernard offered a firm handshake. "Happy birthday, son," Bernard said, placing a small gift bag on the counter. "Nothing fancy, just a new tie. Thought you could use something that wasn't construction stained for a change." "Thanks, Dad," Wesley said, forcing a smile. As they gathered around the cupcake, Wesley couldn't help but remember his sister Tara's birthday 3 months earlier, the elaborate dinner Sybil had planned, complete with custom decorations and a professional photographer. For his parents' anniversary, she'd arranged a weekend trip to wine country. And most tellingly, for Sybil's own birthday 2 months ago, his parents had spared no expense. For my ex-wife's birthday, my parents rented a party bus, hired a DJ, and surprised her with a weekend getaway, Wesley said quietly, staring at the lone cupcake. For mine? A store-bought cupcake and a card signed from all of us. An uncomfortable silence fell. Sybil glanced nervously at his parents. What did you expect? Bernard finally said, his tone dismissive. You're not a kid anymore. The words, so similar to Sybil's earlier remark, confirmed what Wesley had suspected. Their dismissal of him was coordinated, practiced, part of a larger pattern of devaluation leading up to Sybil's planned departure. Wesley stared at the flickering candle, seeing in its small flame the last remnant of the life he'd built. Without a word, he leaned forward and blew it out. Aren't you going to open your card? Judith asked, a note of forced cheer in her voice. Later, Wesley replied, standing abruptly. Excuse me for a moment. He walked upstairs to their bedroom, where he retrieved the packed bag he'd hidden in the back of his closet that morning. Inside were essentials, important documents, and a flash drive containing copies of all the evidence Neil had gathered. When he returned downstairs, Sybil and his parents were speaking in hushed tones in the kitchen. They fell silent when he appeared with the bag. Going somewhere? Sybil asked, her voice unnaturally high. Yes, Wesley said simply. He set his house keys on the counter beside the untouched cupcake. Don't be dramatic, Bernard started, but Wesley cut him off with a raised hand. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being decisive. He looked directly at Sybil. You wanted to wait until after my birthday to tell me you're leaving. Consider this me saving you the trouble. Color drained from Sybil's face. Wesley, I don't know what you're talking about. Goodbye, Sybil. Mom, Dad. He nodded at each of them, then walked out the front door without looking back. As he placed his bag in his truck, he could see them through the kitchen window, gesturing frantically, Judith with her hand over her mouth, Bernard's face reddening as it always did when he was angry. Sybil had her phone in her hand, likely texting Drake. Wesley drove to the small lake house he'd purchased 6 months earlier as an investment property, a transaction he'd kept off the family radar by using a business LLC as the buyer. The renovations weren't complete, but it was livable, and more importantly, no one knew to look for him there. As he settled in for the night, his phone buzzed with messages. From Sybil, we need to talk. Please come home. The kids will worry. From Bernard, you're overreacting. Man up and come back to sort this out. From Judith, darling, please call us. We're concerned. He silenced his phone but didn't turn it off. He wanted to monitor their panic, their scrambling to understand how their careful plans had been derailed. Around midnight, a new message appeared from his neighbor, Ray Coleman. Your parents are crying on your front porch. Where are you? Wesley didn't respond. Instead, he poured himself a bourbon and stood by the lake house window, watching moonlight ripple across the water. The hurt and betrayal were there, a dull ache beneath his sternum, but overshadowing them was a cold clarity of purpose. They thought they knew him, thought he would react with hurt, with begging, with desperate attempts to save a marriage Sybil had already discarded. They expected him to accept whatever scraps of his life they allowed him to keep after they'd carved it up according to their plans. They had fundamentally misjudged him. Wesley Harmon had built his success by turning obstacles into opportunities, by seeing potential where others saw only problems. This situation would be no different. The family that had betrayed him, the wife who had deceived him, the friend who had conspired against him, they had torn down the structure of his life. Now, he would rebuild something new from the rubble they'd created. And when he was finished, none of them would recognize what they'd helped him become. Chapter 4. The Lake House Crucible. For 3 days, Wesley remained at the lake house, phone silenced but not off, watching the increasingly frantic messages accumulate. Sybil's texts evolved from concerned to angry to pleading. His parents called repeatedly. Even Drake sent a message, a masterpiece of hypocrisy, asking if Wesley needed someone to talk to during this difficult time. On the 4th day, the messages abruptly ceased. Through careful monitoring of social media and checking locations via a tracker he'd installed on Sybil's car months earlier, ostensibly for safety, Wesley confirmed his suspicions. Sybil had moved into Drake's downtown loft. The timing was telling. She hadn't even waited a week before abandoning the pretense of a marriage in crisis. In her mind, Wesley's departure had simply accelerated her existing plans. Meanwhile, his parents had posted photos at a restaurant with Drake and Sybil, all smiles despite the family emergency, their hashtag, not his. The betrayal was complete and documented for anyone paying attention. On day 5, Wesley's sister Tara appeared at the lake house door. "How did you find me?" he asked, letting her in. "Because I actually listen when you talk," she replied, setting down a grocery bag. "You mentioned buying this place last fall. When you disappeared, it wasn't hard to connect the dots." She unpacked the bag, coffee, decent whiskey, and real food to replace the convenience store items he'd been subsisting on. "They're telling everyone you had some kind of breakdown," she said, organizing groceries in his sparse kitchen. "Dad's using words like unstable and irrational. Sybil's playing the concerned wife while practically living at Drake's. And the kids? With mom and dad most days. Confused, asking questions nobody's answering honestly." Tara's expression softened. "They miss you." Wesley's jaw tightened. "I miss them too. But I need time." "Time for what exactly?" Tara leaned against the counter, studying him. "Because if it's for plotting some elaborate revenge, I should warn you that Dad's already talking about custody concerns." Using words like abandonment. Wesley nodded slowly. He'd anticipated this. Bernard Harmon had always been strategic in conflict, willing to use any leverage available. That he would use the twins as pawns wasn't surprising, merely disappointing. "I'm not abandoning my children," Wesley said firmly. "But I won't be manipulated back into a situation designed to humiliate me." Tara watched him carefully. "What do you need from me?" "Information. Eyes and ears where I can't be right now. And your discretion." She nodded. "You've always had that. But West, don't lose yourself in this. Whatever they've done, it's not worth destroying who you are." After she left, Wesley considered her warning. But the man he'd been, trusting, devoted, willing to look past slights for family harmony, that man had been taken advantage of. That man had been blind. That man was gone. Over the next 2 weeks, Wesley executed the first phase of his plan. He contacted his lawyer, Morris Baird, and his accountant, Simone Larson, arranging private meetings away from his office where Sybil might have informants. "You want to divest from your primary business while maintaining controlling interest," Morris summarized after Wesley outlined his intentions. "And establish separate trusts for your children that neither Sybil nor your parents can access." "Exactly," Wesley confirmed. "I also want to restructure my holdings to protect against whatever claims Sybil's lawyers might make." "This is unusually thorough planning," Morris observed. "Most clients in your situation act emotionally." "I'm not most clients," Wesley replied. Through Simone, he arranged to liquidate certain investments and secure capital where Sybil couldn't reach it. Not hiding assets. Morris was clear about the legality of every move, but strategically repositioning what was rightfully his. Next, Wesley met with a custody lawyer, Madeline Walsh, recommended by Vince as ruthless but ethical. She reviewed the evidence Neil had gathered. "These text messages show premeditation to separate you from your children," Madeline noted. "References to Drake being a great father figure and your father helping with the transition establish a pattern of planned alienation. It's disturbing, but useful for our case." With his legal foundation secured, Wesley focused on his next steps. Neil continued surveillance, documenting Sybil's behavior, including leaving the children with Bernard and Judith most nights while she stayed at Drake's, her gradual moving of personal items from the family home, and most damning, a consultation with a divorce attorney known for aggressive tactics. By day 20 of his self-imposed exile, Wesley had a comprehensive understanding of his opponent's positions and plans. They believed him emotionally broken and financially vulnerable. They expected him to eventually cave to pressure about the children. They thought his disappearance gave them the upper hand. They were wrong on all counts. On the morning of day 21, Wesley stood on the lake house dock, watching the sunrise. His phone buzzed with a text from Tara. "Dad's leaked to friends that they're concerned about your mental state. Setting groundwork for custody fight." Also, Sybil's officially introduced Drake as her partner at the hospital fundraiser. "Time to move." Wesley texted back a single word, "Yes." That afternoon, he showered, shaved, and dressed in a crisp suit. He retrieved a small wooden box from his bag, a handcrafted item that had once contained his grandfather's watch. Now it held something far more valuable: leverage. As he drove toward town, he called Vince. "Is everything arranged?" "All set," Vince confirmed. "Everyone will be at the Founders Club by 7. Your parents think it's a meeting about your situation. Sybil thinks it's an intervention. Drake's coming as emotional support." "Perfect," Wesley said. "And the other matter?" "Handled. My cousin at the Grand Hotel came through with everything you requested." By sunset, Wesley parked near the Founders Club, an exclusive social establishment where Millfield's elite had gathered for generations. His father had sponsored his membership years ago, calling it essential for a man of your position. Tonight, that exclusive access would serve a purpose Bernard never anticipated. As Wesley entered through the side door, the maitre d' nodded discreetly and led him to a small antechamber adjacent to the private dining room where his family waited. Through a one-way glass panel, Wesley could observe them: Bernard and Judith sitting stiffly, Sybil checking her phone repeatedly, Drake attempting to appear concerned rather than victorious. Tara sat slightly apart from them, her posture tense. Only she knew what was coming. The maitre d' returned. "They've all arrived, Mr. Harmon. Shall I show you in?" Wesley patted the wooden box in his pocket. "Not quite yet. Let them wait a bit longer." Inside the box was a birthday candle, the same one from his ignored celebration, recovered by Tara from the kitchen trash. It would serve as both symbol and warning of what happened when people underestimated Wesley Harmon. Chapter 5: The Founders Club Reckoning. The private dining room of the Founders Club featured rich mahogany paneling, subdued lighting from crystal chandeliers, and an atmosphere of old money that Bernard Harmon had always coveted. As Wesley watched through the one-way glass, his father checked his watch for the third time, irritation evident in the set of his shoulders. "He's not coming," Bernard declared to the table. "This is another one of his stunts." "Dad, please," Tara said, her voice carrying through the speaker system Wesley had arranged to be activated. "He said he'd be here." Sybil smoothed her silk blouse. "New," Wesley noted, "likely purchased with the credit card he hadn't yet canceled. Maybe this is for the best, if he's not ready to discuss things rationally." "What she means," Drake interjected, placing a proprietary hand over Sybil's, "is that forcing confrontation might be counterproductive." Judith Harmon dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "I just want my son back. And those poor children need their father. They have plenty of positive male influence," Bernard said, clapping Drake on the shoulder. "Wesley's behavior has been disappointing, but life continues." The casual dismissal, the easy replacement of him in his children's lives, it confirmed everything Wesley had suspected about their true loyalties. He nodded to the maitre d', who opened the door to the private room. Conversation ceased as Wesley entered, impeccably dressed, clean-shaven, and carrying a leather portfolio. Not the disheveled, emotional wreck they'd expected. "Wesley." Sybil was the first to recover, half rising from her seat with manufactured concern. "We've been so worried." "Please, remain seated," Wesley said, his voice steady. He took the empty chair at the head of the table, his father's usual position. Bernard's eyes narrowed at this deliberate choice. "You've had us concerned, son," Bernard began. "Disappearing like that, abandoning your responsibilities." "I haven't abandoned anything," Wesley interrupted, opening his portfolio. "I've been quite productive, actually." "If this is about Sybil and me," Drake started, his tone conciliatory, "I want you to know it wasn't planned. These things just happen sometimes." Wesley smiled thinly. "Do they, Drake?" "Things just happen. Like weekly meetings at the Grand Hotel that began 3 months after you returned to town? Like the real estate partnership you've been discussing with my father for over a year while pretending to be my friend." Drake paled slightly. Bernard shifted in his seat. "We're all adults here," Sybil said, attempting to regain control of the narrative. "Relationships evolve. People grow apart. There's no need for accusations." "I agree completely," Wesley said, surprising them. "Which is why I've taken steps to help this evolution proceed smoothly." He removed several documents from his portfolio and slid them across the table to Sybil. "Divorce papers, already prepared. You'll find the terms generous but non-negotiable." Sybil frowned, skimming the documents. "This isn't how this works, Wesley. We need to." Your lover purchased a ring at Donovan's Jewelers last week, Wesley continued. Platinum band, 2-carat diamond with sapphire accents. Your favorite combination. The timeline suggests you expect this divorce to move quickly. Drake's stunned expression confirmed the accuracy of this information. How did you? Drake began, then stopped abruptly. How did I know? The same way I know about your meetings with my father to secure investment in your downtown development. The same way I know about the appointment you and Sybil had with Leonard Grant, a divorce attorney known for aggressive tactics against high-earning spouses. Bernard leaned forward. You've been spying on us? I prefer conducting due diligence, Wesley replied. A standard business practice, as you taught me, Dad. He turned to his mother next. Those tears are impressive, Mom, but they might be more convincing if you hadn't helped plan Sybil's exit strategy. The text messages where you suggested she secure personal items gradually were particularly instructive. Judith's hand trembled as she lowered her handkerchief. Wesley removed the wooden box from his pocket and placed it in the center of the table. Do you recognize this? No one spoke. It contains the birthday candle from that sad little cupcake, my last memento of our family's true feelings toward me. He opened the box, revealing the slightly bent candle inside. I keep it as a reminder. A reminder of what? Tara asked, the only person at the table who hadn't been implicated in the betrayal. That appearances are deceiving, and foundations must be regularly inspected for damage. Wesley closed the box. Now to business. The divorce terms are straightforward. Equal division of our marital assets, joint custody of the children with a generous visitation schedule, and no spousal support in either direction. Sybil's eyes widened. No spousal support? But my business doesn't generate nearly what yours. Your business is quite profitable according to the tax returns you've been filing, Wesley cut in. Unless you've been misrepresenting your income, which would be concerning. He turned to Drake next. As for you, the development project my father invested in, the primary investor pulled out yesterday. Financing has collapsed. Drake's face drained of color. That's impossible. We had ironclad commitments. From Rochester Holdings, Wesley confirmed. A subsidiary of Vanguard Capital, which is now under new management. My management, as of last week. It's remarkable what opportunities arise when you have capital and appropriate motivation. Bernard slammed his fist on the table. You deliberately sabotaged a legitimate business deal? This is beyond petty, Wesley. It's destructive. I made a sound business decision based on risk assessment, Wesley corrected. The development was overvalued and under-researched. Drake's projections were, to put it kindly, optimistic. He pulled another document from his portfolio and passed it to his father. This is the new proposal. Fair market value for your investment returned, plus 3% interest. A clean break, financially speaking. Bernard scanned the document, his expression shifting from anger to calculation. Always the businessman, he recognized when he'd been outmaneuvered. What about the children? Judith asked, genuine concern finally breaking through her performance. This vendetta will only hurt Philip and Phoebe. The children are my priority, Wesley stated firmly, which is why I've arranged for a family counselor specializing in divorce transitions. Unlike some in this room, I won't use them as pawns. He stood, gathering his portfolio. You have 48 hours to review and sign the agreements. After that, my offers become significantly less generous, and the information I've gathered becomes significantly more public. You're threatening us? Sybil asked incredulously. I'm establishing boundaries, Wesley corrected. Something I should have done years ago. Drake leaned forward. Listen, Wesley, I understand you're hurt, but destroying what I've built won't change what happened between Sybil and me. You misunderstand, Wesley said, his voice cold. I'm not trying to change the past. I'm ensuring clarity about the future. He paused. By the way, the hotel suite you've been using? I've purchased the entire floor. The property manager suggested converting it to extended stay units might be more profitable than hourly rentals. Drake's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. This isn't over, Bernard warned as Wesley moved toward the door. You're right, Wesley agreed. It's just beginning. He left them sitting in stunned silence, their carefully constructed plans in ruins around them. Outside the club, Vince waited beside his car. How'd it go, he asked. Exactly as expected, Wesley replied. They underestimated me. Again. And the kids. I'm seeing them tomorrow. Tara's bringing them to the lake house. Wesley stared at the club's illuminated windows. No matter what happens with the others, Philip and Phoebe will know their father never abandoned them. As they drove away, Wesley felt not satisfaction but resolve. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully his dignity, his future, and his relationship with his children. The rest was just necessary demolition before rebuilding could begin. Chapter 6. The Paper Trail. The morning after the Founders Club confrontation, Wesley woke to a flurry of messages and missed calls. His lawyer Morris reported that Sybil's attorney had reached out, suddenly eager to discuss amicable terms. His accountant Simone confirmed that Bernard had attempted to access certain joint business accounts, only to discover Wesley had already secured them. Most telling was a text from Drake. "We should talk privately. This doesn't have to be nuclear." Wesley didn't respond to any of them. Instead, he focused on preparing the lake house for Philip and Phoebe's visit. He stocked the refrigerator with their favorite foods, set up fishing rods on the dock, and arranged their favorite board games in the living room. When Tara's car pulled up that afternoon, he felt a momentary trepidation. How had Sybil and his parents poisoned the children against him? What would they have been told about his absence? The twins burst from the car before it fully stopped, racing toward him with unrestrained joy. "Dad!" Phoebe reached him first, launching herself into his arms. "We thought you were on a secret mission." Wesley held them tightly, his throat constricting with emotion. "A secret mission? Grandpa said you had important business," Philip explained, his small face serious. "But you couldn't tell anyone where you were." The manipulation was both predictable and infuriating, Bernard using the children's imaginations to cover for the ugly truth. But Wesley swallowed his anger. "I've been working on something important," he said carefully. "This house, for one thing. Want to see inside?" As the twins explored the lake house, Tara pulled Wesley aside. "They've been staying with Mom and Dad most nights. Sybil's barely there, always working late. The official story is that you two are having grown-up problems, but everything will be fine soon." And they believe that. Kids are smarter than people think. They know something's wrong, but they're trying to be brave about it. Tara squeezed his arm. "Sybil signed the papers this morning. Dad's still holding out, thinking he has leverage." "He doesn't," Wesley said simply. The afternoon passed in a blur of fishing, board games, and the simple joy of reconnecting with his children. They asked innocent questions about when he'd come home, when they could stay at the lake house again, whether Mom would come next time. Wesley answered honestly, but age-appropriately, never disparaging Sybil or his parents. After Tara took the sleepy twins back to town that evening, Wesley called Neil Fisher. "What's the situation?" "Your father met with Drake for 3 hours today," Neil reported. Based on their body language leaving the restaurant, it wasn't pleasant. "Your father then went to Ridgewood Bank and attempted to access the safety deposit box registered to both of you. Did he succeed?" "No. Your power of attorney restriction prevented it." He wasn't happy. Wesley wasn't surprised. That safety deposit box contained the original deeds to several properties they'd jointly developed years ago, properties Bernard had always treated as primarily his despite Wesley's equal financial contribution. And Sybil moved more items to Drake's loft. "She and your mother had lunch, lots of tears. Then she met with her lawyer again." The chess pieces were moving exactly as Wesley had anticipated. Signing the divorce papers had been Sybil's attempt to appear reasonable, likely on advice from her lawyer after reviewing the evidence Wesley possessed. Bernard's bank visit indicated desperation to secure whatever assets he could before Wesley restricted access further. The next morning, Wesley drove to his office for the first time since his birthday. His employees greeted him with relief and questions about his extended business trip, the cover story his operations manager had been instructed to share. In his private office, Wesley reviewed the company's status. Despite his absence, projects were proceeding on schedule. His team had maintained operations seamlessly, proving what he'd long suspected. He'd built something that could function without his daily presence. Mid-afternoon, his assistant announced an unexpected visitor, Bernard Harmon. Wesley considered refusing the meeting but decided against it. Better to face his father directly than allow him to believe Wesley was avoiding confrontation. Bernard entered the office with his usual commanding presence, though Wesley noted new lines of stress around his eyes. "Your secretary treats me like a stranger," Bernard complained, taking a seat without waiting for invitation. "Melissa is my executive assistant, Wesley corrected. And she follows protocol for all visitors. Bernard waved this away. I've reviewed your proposal. It's unacceptable. It's fair, Wesley countered. More than fair, considering the circumstances. You're allowing emotion to interfere with business, Bernard insisted. That development project would have been profitable for both of us. Your petty retaliation hurts your own interests. Does it? Wesley leaned back in his chair. Because my analysis suggests Drake's project was significantly overextended. The land purchase was overvalued by at least 15%, and the projected rental returns were based on occupancy rates this market hasn't seen in a decade. Bernard's expression flickered. The numbers were sound. Were they? Or did you want them to be sound because Drake had wormed his way into your confidence while betraying your son? Wesley kept his voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath his words. Did you even conduct due diligence, Dad? Or did you just enjoy being the magnanimous patriarch backing your new favorite son? That's unfair, Bernard protested, but with less conviction. Is it? Let's talk about fair. Wesley opened his desk drawer and removed a manila folder. This contains copies of documents I found interesting. Bank transfers from your personal account to Drake's development company dating back 14 months. Well before you mention the project to me. Email exchanges where you discuss, and I quote, transitioning certain family assets without triggering Wesley's involvement. Bernard's face paled. Where did you get those? I've spent 3 weeks following paper trails, Dad. Digital breadcrumbs. It's amazing what people leave exposed when they think no one's looking. Wesley tapped the folder. I particularly enjoyed the email where you told Drake that I lacked vision and would eventually need to be managed out of certain decisions. Those were business discussions, Bernard insisted, though his voice had lost its authoritative edge. Nothing personal. Nothing personal, Wesley repeated softly. Like arranging elaborate celebrations for everyone in the family except me? Like undermining my marriage by encouraging my wife's affair? Like conspiring to reduce my role in my children's lives after the divorce you knew was coming? Bernard's silence was confirmation enough. Sign the agreement, Wesley said. Take the fair return on your investment and step back from my business affairs permanently. Or don't, and discover exactly how much documentation I've accumulated about your tax strategies over the years. You'd threaten your own father with an audit? You stopped acting like my father long ago, Wesley replied. Now you're just another business associate who's breached trust. Bernard stared at his son as if seeing him for the first time. I never thought you had this in you. That was your mistake, Wesley said. One of many. After Bernard left, presumably to consult his own lawyers, Wesley sat quietly in his office, feeling no triumph, only a hollow confirmation of what he'd already known. His father had never truly respected him, had always been looking for a more suitable heir to his legacy, even if that meant embracing the man who'd helped destroy his son's marriage. Later that evening, as Wesley worked at the lake house, his phone displayed an incoming call from Drake Powell. He let it ring through to voicemail, then listened to the message. Wesley, this has gone far enough. You've made your point. Bernard signed your agreement. Sybil's accepted your terms. But this vendetta against my business is crossing a line. Call me back so we can discuss a reasonable compromise. The desperation in Drake's voice told Wesley everything he needed to know. Without Bernard's investment and with the primary financing withdrawn, Drake's project was collapsing. His reputation in local business circles would suffer accordingly. Wesley didn't call back. Instead, he forwarded the voicemail to Vince with a text. Phase 3 begins tomorrow. Vince replied immediately. The documents from the Grand Hotel are ready. And that other matter we discussed? My contact at the Zoning Commission confirmed it can be arranged. Wesley smiled grimly. Bernard and Sybil had capitulated as expected, accepting the terms he'd offered because they recognized the alternative would be worse. But Drake, the catalyst for so much destruction, had yet to fully understand the consequences of betraying Wesley Harmon. That was about to change. Chapter 7, Grand Designs. The Grand Hotel stood as Millfield's premier luxury establishment, a restored Victorian mansion catering to wealthy visitors and locals seeking discretion for various purposes. Its reputation for privacy had made it the perfect venue for Sybil and Drake's affair. Now, that same reputation would become instrumental in their downfall. Wesley arrived for his appointment with Lawrence Kincaid, the hotel's manager, precisely at 10 a.m. Lawrence, a thin man with immaculate silver hair and the perpetually accommodating manner of a career hospitality professional, welcomed him personally. "Mr. Harmon, a pleasure as always. Your friend Mr. Reeves mentioned you have a business proposition." "I do," Wesley confirmed as they settled in Lawrence's wood-paneled office. "I understand the Grand is considering renovations to the East Wing." Lawrence brightened. "Indeed. The board has approved preliminary budgeting, though we haven't selected a contractor yet. Harmon Construction would like to submit a proposal," Wesley said, opening his portfolio. "Competitive rates, premium materials, and an accelerated timeline." As Lawrence reviewed the preliminary designs Wesley presented, his professional enthusiasm was evident. "This is exceptional work. The board would be very interested." "I'm glad to hear it," Wesley said. "However, there's another matter I'd like to discuss, one requiring discretion." Lawrence's expression shifted subtly to guarded neutrality, the look of a man accustomed to managing delicate situations for important clients. "Of course. I understand that certain hotel records were provided to my associate regarding specific guests. I want to ensure that cooperation continues." The manager's discomfort was momentary, but visible. "Mr. Harmon, while I appreciate your interest in our renovation project, I must emphasize that guest privacy is paramount. Whatever information was shared previously was irregular." "I understand completely," Wesley said smoothly, "and I respect the hotel's commitment to discretion." He removed a folder from his briefcase. "Which is why I've prepared this." Inside was a legally binding contract guaranteeing Harmon Construction would handle the East Wing renovations at a 15% discount from market rate, contingent upon Lawrence's continued administrative cooperation regarding certain records. "This isn't a bribe, Lawrence," Wesley clarified as the manager scanned the document. "It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. The hotel gets superior renovation work at below-market cost. I get information that, frankly, I'm legally entitled to anyway since I'm paying for the rooms in question." Lawrence's eyebrows rose. "You're paying for the rooms?" "Indeed. For the past 3 weeks, Suite 412 has been billed to one of my business accounts. An administrative oversight on Mr. Powell's part, thinking the charges were going to his company. This was, of course, a fabrication. Vince's cousin had simply redirected the billing with a few keyboard strokes after Wesley had made it worth her while. But Lawrence didn't need to know those details. "I see," Lawrence said slowly. "And this renovation contract is genuine and highly advantageous to the Grand. The board would be quite pleased with your negotiating skills." After a moment's consideration, Lawrence nodded. "I believe we can come to an arrangement, Mr. Harmon." With the hotel manager's cooperation secured, Wesley proceeded to the second appointment of the day, a lunch meeting with Councilwoman Patricia Rodriguez at Millfield's most visible restaurant. "I appreciate you meeting on such short notice," Wesley said after they'd ordered. "Your support during my campaign made this a priority," Patricia replied. "What can I do for you?" "I'm concerned about the downtown revitalization project," Wesley began, "particularly the Powell development proposal for the old textile mill." Patricia frowned. "The zoning commission is reviewing it next week. There are some questions about the environmental impact assessment." "That's exactly my concern," Wesley said. "My company recently conducted renovations on several historic buildings in that area. We discovered concerning levels of industrial chemicals in the soil, legacy contamination from the mill's operating days." This wasn't entirely false. Harmon Construction had indeed found contamination during prior projects, though not at levels requiring extensive remediation. "That's troubling," Patricia said. "But surely Powell Development's environmental assessment would have caught this?" "One would hope," Wesley agreed. "However, I've reviewed their public filings. Their assessment seems cursory at best. I'd hate to see the city assume liability for a rushed project." By the time lunch concluded, Patricia had agreed to raise these concerns with the zoning commission, potentially delaying approval until a more comprehensive environmental study could be conducted, a process that would take months and add significant costs to Drake's already precarious project. That afternoon, Wesley met with 3 more strategic contacts: the president of Millfield National Bank, where Drake had applied for secondary financing, a commercial real estate broker who had been helping Drake secure tenants for his development, and finally, the publisher of the Millfield Business Journal, who was preparing a profile on local development visionaries featuring Drake prominently. At each meeting, Wesley planted seeds of doubt, not through outright lies, but through carefully framed concerns and strategic revelations. The bank president learned that Drake's primary investor had withdrawn. The real estate broker discovered that proposed rental rates were significantly above market value. The publisher heard rumors of personal complications that might impact the development timeline. None of these meetings, taken individually, would be fatal to Drake's project or reputation. But collectively, they created a web of hesitation, delay, and reconsideration that would slowly tighten around him. That evening, as Wesley returned to the lake house, his phone displayed a message from Tara. "Drake's losing it. Called Dad demanding to know why you're meeting with his business contacts. Sybil spent the afternoon crying to Mom about how you're deliberately destroying their future. Dad told them both to handle their own problems." The message confirmed what Wesley had expected. Word of his meetings had spread quickly through Millfield's interconnected business community, reaching Drake and triggering exactly the reaction he'd anticipated. More importantly, Bernard was distancing himself from their problems, the actions of a businessman cutting losses on a bad investment. The next morning, Wesley received a call from Morris Baird. Bernard signed all the agreements, his lawyer reported. Clean separation of business interests, release of claims on shared properties, everything we asked for. And Sybil? Final custody arrangement approved. Joint legal custody, primary physical with you since she's effectively moved in with Powell. Her lawyer pushed back on the financial terms, but ultimately accepted when I mentioned the hotel documentation. Wesley felt a grim satisfaction. The direct confrontations were resolving as planned. But the true impact of his strategy would emerge in the coming weeks as Drake's professional standing slowly eroded and Sybil realized the consequences of her choices. That afternoon, Wesley met with a realtor to list the family home for sale. He had no desire to return there. Too many tainted memories, too much broken trust embedded in those walls. The lake house would become his and the children's primary residence after some additional renovations. As he walked through the empty family home with the realtor, his phone buzzed with a text from Drake. "Whatever you're doing, stop it. My financing is being questioned, tenants are getting cold feet, and the zoning commission suddenly has concerns. Fix this, or I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are." Wesley almost laughed at the empty threat. What could Drake possibly reveal? That Wesley had the audacity to object to his wife's affair? That he refused to finance the man who'd betrayed him? That he utilized business connections he'd built over decades? Later that evening, as Wesley prepared dinner for himself at the lake house, a car appeared in his driveway. Drake Powell emerged, his usual polished appearance noticeably disheveled. Wesley met him at the door. "This is private property." "Cut the crap, Harmon," Drake snapped. "You're systematically destroying everything I've worked for. It stops now." "Or what?" Wesley asked calmly. "Or I'll tell your kids exactly what kind of vindictive bastard their father is," Drake threatened. "How you couldn't handle your wife falling in love with someone else, so you decided to ruin lives out of spite." Something cold settled in Wesley's chest. "You'd involve my children in this?" "You started this war," Drake said. "Don't act surprised about collateral damage." Wesley studied the man before him, the supposed friend who'd slept with his wife, conspired with his father, and now threatened his children's well-being. In that moment, any lingering doubt about his course of action vanished. "Come inside," Wesley said. "Let's discuss this like businessmen." Drake followed him into the lake house living room, visibly surprised by the invitation. "Finally seeing reason?" "Seeing clearly," Wesley corrected. He retrieved 2 glasses and a bottle of bourbon, pouring drinks for them both. "You believe I'm acting out of emotional vengeance. I'm not. This is simply business." "Bullshit," Drake spat. "You're punishing Sybil and me for falling in love." "Love?" Wesley raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you call it?" "Yes, love," Drake insisted. "Something genuine happened between us. Something real. We tried to fight it, but—" "Spare me the romantic revisionism," Wesley interrupted. "Let me show you something." He opened his laptop and turned the screen toward Drake. On display was a compilation of text messages between Sybil and Drake spanning the past year. "Read them," Wesley instructed, "particularly the ones from last September." Drake's expression shifted as he scanned the messages, exchanges discussing not love, but strategy. Sybil asking when they should make their move. Drake suggesting they wait until he had Bernard's investment secured. calculations about optimal timing for divorce proceedings to maximize Sybil's financial position. There's nothing about love here, Wesley observed. Just calculated opportunism. You saw my wife as access to my father's money and business connections. She saw you as an upgrade from the construction guy she'd outgrown socially. Drake's face flushed. These are taken out of context. Are they? Here's a message from February. You asking Sybil if she's sure about leaving Wesley given his business success. Her responding that with your development project and her father-in-law's backing, you'd surpass Wesley's local success within 2 years. Wesley closed the laptop. Sounds like a business arrangement, not a love story. What do you want? Drake asked, his bravado diminishing. I want you to understand something fundamental, Wesley said. I'm not destroying your project out of revenge. I'm doing it because it's poorly conceived, inadequately financed, and would likely fail regardless of my intervention. The fact that it happens to impact you personally is incidental. You expect me to believe that? Believe what you want. But know this. If you ever threaten to involve my children again, what I've done so far will seem trivial. Wesley's voice remained conversational, but his eyes hardened. In business, I'm methodical. When it comes to my children, I'm ruthless. Drake drained his bourbon, clearly unnerved by Wesley's calm intensity. This isn't over. Actually, it is, Wesley replied. Your development project will fail within weeks. Your business reputation in Millfield is already compromised. My father has withdrawn his support. And Sybil, well, she's beginning to realize her miscalculation. What does that mean? It means she's discovered that my parents' social circle was loyal to their position, not to her personally. It means her event planning business is losing clients who don't want to be associated with scandal. It means she's watching her carefully constructed future crumble because she banked on the wrong man. Drake stood abruptly. You're a vindictive bastard. No, Wesley corrected. I'm a businessman protecting my interests, including my children's well-being. He gestured toward the door. Now, unless you'd like copies of these messages sent to your remaining investors, I suggest you leave. After Drake's departure, Wesley stood on the dock, watching darkness settle over the lake. There was no satisfaction in watching his carefully executed plan unfold, only the grim determination of a man dismantling threats to what mattered most. The true victory would come not from their suffering, but from the new life he was methodically constructing from the ruins of their betrayal. Chapter 8. The Candle's Flame. 3 months after his birthday, Wesley sat in family court for the final custody hearing. Across the room, Sybil appeared diminished, her designer clothes replaced by more modest attire, her confident posture now hesitant. Drake was noticeably absent. Their divorce had been finalized weeks earlier with minimal drama. Sybil had accepted the terms Wesley offered, likely advised by her lawyer that contesting them would only expose more of her calculated betrayal. The court has reviewed the parenting plans submitted by both parties, Judge Eleanor Winters announced. Given the circumstances and the recommendations of the court-appointed evaluator, I'm approving the joint legal custody arrangement with primary physical residence with Mr. Harmon and the visitation schedule as proposed. Sybil's face remained impassive, though Wesley noticed her hands trembling slightly. After the hearing, she approached him in the corridor. Could we talk privately? Wesley nodded, following her to a quiet alcove away from the departing attorneys and court personnel. Drake's leaving town, she said without preamble. The development project collapsed completely when the environmental issues were discovered. He's taken a position in Atlanta. I see, Wesley replied neutrally. He asked me to go with him. Her voice wavered. I said no. Wesley waited, sensing more to come. I made a terrible mistake, Sybil continued, tears forming. I convinced myself that what we had wasn't enough, that I deserved more excitement, more status. I let Drake and your father fill my head with ideas about the life we could have. And now I've lost everything that actually mattered. She wiped at her tears. My business is struggling. Your parents barely speak to me anymore. Drake blames me for not standing by him during the project collapse. She looked up at Wesley, desperation evident. We could try again. For the children. They need both of us. Wesley studied the woman he'd once loved completely, seeing now the calculation behind her apparent vulnerability. This wasn't genuine remorse. It was another strategy. With Drake leaving and her social position compromised, she was seeking the most stable option available. The children will always have both of us, Wesley said carefully. We'll co-parent as effectively as possible. But there is no we beyond that. Wesley, please. No. The word was quiet, but final. What was broken can't be repaired. Not because I can't forgive, but because I can't forget who you revealed yourself to be. Her expression hardened. You've destroyed everything. Drake's career, my business, our family. You and Drake destroyed our family, Wesley corrected. My father damaged our relationship long before that. I simply refused to keep pretending these things hadn't happened. Your revenge has cost everyone, Sybil insisted. This wasn't about revenge, Wesley said. It was about consequences. There's a difference. He left her standing there, her carefully constructed narrative of victimhood crumbling around her. Outside the courthouse, Vince waited beside his car. All settled? Vince asked. Legally, yes. Wesley got into the passenger seat. Drake's leaving town. Sybil just made a last-ditch effort to reconcile. Vince raised an eyebrow. And some candles, once blown out, can't be relit. Later that afternoon, Wesley met with Bernard at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown where neither of them typically frequented. His father looked older somehow, the past months having etched new lines around his eyes. You wanted to see me, Bernard stated rather than asked. I did. Wesley passed a folder across the table. These are the papers transferring ownership of the Riverside property back to you. Bernard's surprise was evident. Why would you do that? Because despite everything, you're still my father. And that property was your life's work before you brought me into the business. Bernard opened the folder cautiously, as if expecting some trap. This is unexpected. I'm not interested in punishing you indefinitely, Wesley explained. What's done is done, but I want to be clear about boundaries moving forward. Meaning you're welcome to have a relationship with your grandchildren. That door remains open. But our business relationship is permanently severed, and my personal trust can't be rebuilt. Bernard nodded slowly. Your mother misses the children. And you. They miss her too, Wesley acknowledged. She can see them whenever she wants. You as well, within reasonable parameters. But understand this. Any attempt to undermine my parental authority or manipulate the situation will result in immediate restrictions. You've become hard, son. I've become clear, Wesley corrected. There's a difference. After Bernard left with the property documents, Wesley remained at the coffee shop, reflecting on the journey of the past months. The systematic dismantling of Drake's professional standing had been coldly strategic. Calls to business associates raising legitimate concerns, carefully timed revelations to financial backers, and strategic deployment of damaging information. The environmental issues at the textile mill site had indeed been real, though perhaps not as severe as the investigation Wesley had encouraged had made them appear. The resulting delays and additional costs had been the final blow to Drake's already precarious financing. Sybil's social and professional unraveling had been less directly orchestrated but equally inevitable. In Millfield's close-knit business community, taking sides was inevitable, and few wanted to align themselves with the losing faction. As Drake's star fell, Sybil's event planning business suffered from guilt by association. His phone buzzed with a text from Tara. The kids are excited about movie night at the lake house. What time should I bring them? The simple message centered him. Throughout everything, he'd maintained his focus on what truly mattered, his children's well-being and creating a stable future for them. That evening, as Philip and Phoebe settled into the newly renovated lake house for their regular weekend stay, Wesley felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for months. Dad, can we have a fire pit by the lake? Philip asked as they played a board game. Maybe, Wesley said. We need to make sure it's safe. For marshmallows, Phoebe explained seriously. And stories. Grandma said you used to tell the best stories when you were little. The mention of his mother didn't sting as it once might have. Did she now? She said she misses your stories, Philip added. And she's sorry. Wesley looked at his son's earnest face, realizing his mother had used the child to convey a message she hadn't been brave enough to deliver herself. Well, Wesley said after a moment, perhaps Grandma can come hear some stories herself sometime. Later, after the children were asleep, Wesley sat on the dock, staring at the reflection of stars on the lake's surface. He removed the small wooden box from his pocket, the one containing the birthday candle that had marked the beginning of this journey. For a moment, he considered throwing it into the dark water, a symbolic release of everything that had happened. Instead, he returned it to his pocket. Some reminders were worth keeping, not out of bitterness, but as testament to personal boundaries that should never again be crossed. The structures he'd dismantled, his marriage, his relationship with his parents, Drake's career ambitions, had been built on false foundations. What he was constructing now might be smaller in scope, but it was authentic, solid, built to endure. And that, Wesley reflected as he gazed across the calm waters, was what truly mattered in the end. Chapter 9. Foundations Rebuilt. 1 year after the birthday that had changed everything, Wesley stood in the newly completed office of Harmon Legacy Construction. The company name change had been part of his fresh start, a recognition that what he built now would extend beyond his lifetime, a true legacy for his children. The business had thrived despite Bernard's dire predictions of failure without his connections. If anything, being freed from his father's outdated approaches had allowed Wesley to expand in directions he'd previously hesitated to explore. Sustainable building practices, affordable housing initiatives alongside luxury renovations, and an apprenticeship program for disadvantaged youth interested in construction trades. The lake house had been transformed into a permanent home, with dedicated bedrooms for Philip and Phoebe decorated according to their enthusiastic specifications. The promised fire pit had been installed by the water, becoming the center of weekend storytelling sessions and marshmallow roasting. Sybil had left Millfield 6 months earlier, following Drake to Atlanta after all, though in diminished circumstances. Her event planning business had never recovered, and Drake's new position reportedly carried less prestige than his previous ambitions. They maintained minimal contact, with Sybil calling the children weekly and visiting monthly as per the custody agreement. Bernard and Judith had gradually re-entered Wesley's life, though solely as grandparents rather than advisors or confidants. The boundaries Wesley established remained firm. They were welcome to attend the children's school events and participate in family gatherings, but business matters and personal decisions remained strictly off-limits for discussion. To everyone's surprise, Tara had become the bridge between Wesley and his parents, brokering small steps toward a civil, if fundamentally altered, family dynamic. The siblings had grown closer through the ordeal, with Tara providing unwavering support for Wesley's decisions while gently encouraging forgiveness where possible, without compromising the hard-earned lessons of the past year. As Wesley finished reviewing blueprints for his latest project, ironically, a complete renovation of the Grand Hotel's East Wing, his assistant announced a visitor. "Mr. Drake Powell is here," she said with evident discomfort. "He doesn't have an appointment." Wesley considered refusing the meeting, but curiosity won out. "Send him in." Drake entered looking considerably different from the polished developer who had once charmed Millfield's social circle. His expensive suit had been replaced by more modest attire, and the confident swagger had diminished to cautious body language. "Wesley," he began awkwardly. "Thank you for seeing me. What brings you back to Millfield?" Wesley asked, remaining seated behind his desk. "Finalizing the sale of my remaining property here." Drake hesitated. "And personal matters." "Sybil." Drake's expression tightened. "She's returning to town. We've ended things." "I see." Wesley maintained a neutral tone. "And you're telling me this because?" "Because I thought you should hear it from me directly." Drake shifted uncomfortably. "She'll likely seek increased visitation with the children. Maybe even push to revise the custody arrangement." Wesley noted the warning with interest. "That's her right. The courts will determine what's appropriate." "There's something else," Drake continued. "What happened between Sybil and me? It wasn't what you might think." "Meaning?" "It wasn't some grand passion or love story. It was calculated. On both our parts." Drake looked genuinely uncomfortable with this admission. "I saw an opportunity to access your father's connections and capital." She saw a chance to elevate her social standing beyond what she felt was possible as just a contractor's wife. "This isn't news to me," Wesley said evenly. "I saw the text messages, remember?" "Right. Of course." Drake swallowed hard. "What you might not know is that it was Bernard who first suggested I get closer to Sybil. He thought she was unfulfilled in your marriage. Said she deserved someone who could match her ambitions." Though Wesley had suspected something like this, hearing it confirmed sent a cold wave through him. "My father encouraged the affair?" "Not explicitly," Drake clarified. "He created opportunities, made suggestions. After it began, he certainly facilitated things, covering for Sybil with your mother, ensuring you were occupied with work when we had plans. Why tell me this now? Because I'm starting over elsewhere, Drake said. And because what I did, was wrong on every level. Not just the affair, but the manipulation, using your father against you, planning to edge you out of your children's lives. He paused. I've lost everything that actually mattered because I was chasing status and shortcuts. It seems like karma, but it was really just consequences, like you said. After Drake left, Wesley sat quietly, absorbing this final piece of the betrayal puzzle. His father's involvement had been even more calculated than he'd imagined. Not just taking advantage of the situation, but helping orchestrate it from the beginning. That evening, as Wesley prepared dinner for himself and the children, his phone displayed an incoming call from Bernard. For a moment, he considered ignoring it. Their relationship had stabilized into a cordial but distant arrangement that served the children's needs while protecting Wesley's boundaries. Something prompted him to answer. Hello, Dad. Wesley. Bernard's voice sounded uncharacteristically hesitant. Drake Powell came to see me today. Did he? He said he'd spoken with you. Told you things about my involvement. Bernard paused. I wanted you to hear my side. There's no side that justifies what you did, Wesley replied, his voice cool but controlled. No, there isn't, Bernard agreed, surprising Wesley. I've spent a year telling myself stories about my motivations, that I was trying to help Sybil fulfill her potential, that Drake reminded me of myself at his age, that you were too absorbed in work to notice your marriage failing. Wesley remained silent, allowing his father to continue. The truth is simpler and uglier, Bernard admitted. I was jealous. You built something more substantial than I ever managed. You did it your way, not mine. The more successful you became, the more it highlighted my own limitations. His voice wavered. So I tried to regain control the only way I knew how, by positioning myself as the patriarch making decisions about everyone's lives, including who should be with whom. That's unexpectedly self-aware, Wesley said after a moment. Your mother has insisted I see a therapist, Bernard explained with a hint of his old gruffness. Apparently, I have narcissistic tendencies that damaged my relationship with my children. Who knew? Despite everything, Wesley found himself smiling slightly at his father's tone. Everyone, Dad. Everyone knew. Yes, well. Bernard cleared his throat. I don't expect forgiveness. That's not why I called. I needed you to know that I recognize what I did. The damage I caused. And I'm sorry, son. Truly. The words Wesley had never expected to hear from his father hung in the air between them. Not a strategic apology designed to regain advantage, but a genuine acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Thank you for that, Wesley said finally. It matters that you said it. Would you consider? Bernard hesitated. Your mother and I would like to have dinner sometime. Just to talk. No agenda. Let me think about it, Wesley replied. Not an acceptance, but not an outright rejection either. After they hung up, Wesley returned to preparing dinner, his movements measured and thoughtful. The twins would be home from their after-school activities soon, bringing their energy and chatter to fill the house. Life continued, shaped but not defined by the betrayals of the past. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Wesley retrieved the wooden box containing the birthday candle from his desk drawer. He'd kept it all this time as a reminder of the moment everything changed, the catalyst that had forced him to see clearly what had been happening around him. Now, looking at the bent wax column, he realized its significance had evolved. No longer a symbol of betrayal and humiliation, it represented instead the moment he'd stopped accepting less than he deserved, the point where he'd reclaimed control of his own narrative. Wesley carried the box outside to the fire pit by the lake. The night was clear, stars reflected on the water's surface, a gentle breeze rustling through the trees. He opened the box, removed the candle, and placed it in the center of the cold fire pit. Some things deserve to be released, not out of forgiveness necessarily, but as recognition that they no longer served a purpose. The lessons had been learned, the boundaries established, the consequences delivered. He struck a match and touched it to the candle. The small flame flickered momentarily, then caught, burning steadily in the night air. Wesley watched it until it consumed the wax entirely, leaving nothing but a small pool of melted residue. In its place, he would build new traditions, new memories with his children. The foundation he created now would be solid, honest, and entirely his own design. As the last of the flame extinguished, Wesley turned back toward the house. His house, built on his terms. Behind him, the lake reflected countless stars, possibilities stretching endless as the night sky above. The man who had left his birthday celebration a year ago would never have imagined this outcome. Not just survival, but a life rebuilt with greater integrity and clearer purpose than before. Not just consequences for those who had betrayed him, but genuine freedom from the toxic patterns that had constrained him for years. It wasn't about forgiveness. Some betrayals cut too deep for that. But it was about moving forward with purpose rather than bitterness, about building something worthy rather than simply destroying what had been lost. And as Wesley Harmon closed the door of his lake house behind him, he knew with absolute certainty that the structure he'd created, both in his business and in his life, would endure long after the betrayals that had necessitated its construction had faded from memory. That was his true revenge, not their suffering, but his triumph. Not their destruction, but his rebirth. Not the candle extinguished, but the stronger flame that rose in its place. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.